What's up guys, today I'm working on my 80 series Land Cruiser and I'm replacing my alternator. I went to turn on my vehicle and it wouldn't start. And a no start issue can be caused by a variety of different engine components, but in this case I know it is my alternator and I'll tell you why in just a second. In this video I'm going to show you how I was able to confirm it was my alternator that went bad, how to replace the alternator on the 80 series Land Cruiser, the FJ80, specifically the year from 91 to 92, and the tools that I used and some crucial tips that I learned along the way. But first, let's go over a few things that we need to test to confirm it is in fact the alternator. A while before my vehicle stopped running, these lights lit up on my dashboard, and after doing some research, I was able to figure out that it was most likely either a wiring issue or an alternator issue. Then once my battery completely died, my engine wouldn't start. So I pulled out my battery and I had it tested at my local auto parts store, and they were able to confirm it was a good battery, and while I had it there, I had them fully charge it. After charging the battery, the Land Cruiser does turn on, but if you notice here, the lights on the dash are still lit up, which most likely indicates an alternator issue. And one thing you'll notice is if I turn on my headlights or other accessories like air conditioner or maybe my radio, you'll notice that this voltage indicator slowly starts to drop. And that's probably a sign of a bad alternator, but we have to know for sure. So I got my multimeter and I'm going to connect it to my battery and have it start running. Once it's running, we're going to check the voltage. A good alternator should be reading at about 14.4 or so after it starts and at idle. And as you notice here, it's not even close to that. It's at 12 and it's dropping down to 11 and so on and so forth. So as you can see here, I clearly have a bad alternator and we need to replace it. Before we get started, if you're new to me or you're new to the channel, I make videos on my 80 series Land Cruiser. These are mainly just maintenance videos and I'd love to do some upgrades down the line, but for now I'm focusing on maintenance and the longevity of my vehicle since I use it as a daily driver. And as many of you already know, I'm not a mechanic and I don't claim to be one. I'm just like you, a person who likes to work on their 80 series Land Cruiser and likes to make videos about it. So hopefully this video saves you some time, saves you some money, and maybe it encourages you to work on your own vehicle and have fun doing it. So let's dive right into the tools you're going to need for this repair. You're going to need a set of 2 pliers. Some channel lock pliers and vice grip pliers are what I used. You don't need these, but this is just what I had in my toolbox. Also 2 socket wrenches, a 12mm, a 14mm, and a 15mm, some socket wrench extenders, some safety glasses. You want to protect your eyes, you got to be safe. And also these tools over here aren't absolutely necessary, but they do make the job a little easier, like this magnetic tray, this magnetic reach extender tool, this breaker bar, this mini pick and hook set, and PB blaster and or WD-40. Now let's get started with the repair. So first we're going to disconnect the battery and move the cables off to the side. Now with a socket wrench, let's remove the 3 12mm bolts that connect the blower motor, and we're going to set that also to the side. This is the smog pump and we need to remove it to get to the alternator. Now there are 3 hoses that are in the way for us to get to the smog pump, so using our pliers we're going to remove this metal clamp and get it out of the way so we can pull off this hose. The way we're going to pull it off is we're going to slowly twist and pull little by little until it's completely wiggled out, and that way we get some separation between the hose and the connector until it comes off. This is a little bit of a process and it does take some time, and we want to be careful to not lean on any other hose, and that way we don't damage anything else around this area. So just take your time, slowly wiggle it out until it completely comes off. Now let's go to the other end of the hose, and we're going to also remove this clamp, and we're going to twist the hose out of the way so it's not in the way when we pull out our alternator. Now let's go ahead and remove the other hose that connects all the way to the engine air filter. This one's not that hard to remove, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it completely, but we're going to do the same process. We're going to remove the clamp, move it out of the way so we can wiggle it out, and then just get it out of the way. And we're going to do the same thing for that final hose. Remove the clamp, set it aside, and slowly wiggle it out, twisting and pulling until it completely comes out. But for this last one, again, we're not going to remove the hose. We're just going to set it to the side so that way it's not in our way of pulling out the parts. And really quick here before I move on, So there is another hose that is sort of in the way to remove this bottom clamp. You'll see these little clamps here. I had to push them towards the middle to get those out of the way so I could freely move this hose, and that way I'm able to get it out and not in the way of where I'm going to be working. So just wanted to mention that really quick before I moved on. There are 3 wires with connectors that will prevent us from getting to the alternator freely when we're working on it. So we're going to disconnect these and set those to the side. These are really easy to remove. Just press down on this tab and pull away. We're also going to disconnect the power connector that connects to the back of the alternator and set that to the side. This is easy as well. We just got to wiggle that out. We're also going to remove the ground cable that connects to the alternator using a 12mm and an extender. We're going to go ahead and remove that. And one thing I really like to do when I remove any type of bolts, I always like to put them back to where they were. So in this case, once I remove it and remove the ground cable, I'm going to go ahead and put that 12mm bolt right back on the alternator so I know exactly where it is and I don't lose it. Now with a 12mm socket, we're going to remove the bar that goes from the smog pump down to the alternator. The bolt at the bottom is pretty hard to reach, so this is where the long breaker bar comes into play. You could also get under the vehicle to get a better angle, which is actually what I ended up having to do. Now let's remove the smog pump. With a 12mm socket, loosen up the bolt on the bracket located here. I'm using a breaker bar to get to it because my hand doesn't fit. Here's a shot of the smog pump already removed so you can see what I'm talking about. This bolt is located between the smog pump and the alternator, and this is the bolt we're going to loosen up. Once that's nice and loose, now we're going to go to the other side of it over here, and with the 12mm socket, we're going to loosen up the adjusting bolt. This is going to make it easier to take out the smog pump by relieving tension from the belt, and this basically adjusts the belt that is attached to the alternator itself. With that nice and loose, we can now remove the 2 bolts that mount the smog pump, a 14mm and a 15mm. So this is where the 2 socket wrenches come into play. Once those are removed, we're going to be able to slip out the belt and in turn then remove the smog pump slowly. With the smog pump out of the way, we can now access the alternator. And now, before we do that, we're going to remove the bracket that is attached here by 2 12mm bolts. Now we're going to remove these 3 12mm bolts. 2 of these bolts mount the bracket, and the third one is the one that's connected to the alternator. And we're going to set the mounting bracket aside. Now you're going to notice that I didn't do this, but I highly recommend doing this because I ended up actually removing it later on, and it was worth it to do it. That way it's out of the way. And finally, to remove the alternator, we will need to use 2 socket wrenches with an extender. A 14mm and a 15mm. This is going to take a little bit of time, but it's not too hard once you get it going. I'm going to show you how to find it. So you see this 14mm right here. On the other side of it will be the 15mm. And once you kind of get it going, you'll just start loosening it up. You'll keep one side straight and the other one you will loosen slowly. If you're having some trouble, apply some PB Blaster. Now we can finally remove the alternator. And now it's time to put it all back together. And to do that, just do everything I just did in reverse, and that should help. And as you can see here, the engine is working perfectly fine. The voltage is going up to the proper voltage that it should be. And also, those lights that were on the dash completely resolved. Hope this video helped.